Picture a helicopter hovering low over the dark ocean as commandos prepare to drop onto the massive metal deck of a moving ship. The Royal Marines boarded the Smirtos specifically to secure its cargo, 100,000 tons of Russian crude oil. The 25-man crew offered no resistance as the commandos took control of the deck. The entire operation took 6 hours, marking the very first time UK armed forces have led a maritime interception of this kind since the conflict in Ukraine began. After years of conducting a strictly financial war against the Kremlin, this physical raid on the open water marks a shift toward direct military enforcement of economic sanctions. Standard Western economic sanctions were intended to cut off the funding for the Russian war machine, but in practice, those sanctions have been difficult to enforce at sea. To bypass global laws, operators built what analysts call a shadow fleet, a clandestine network of more than 700 transport ships operating outside of standard maritime oversight. This chart highlights the scale of the leak. 75% of Russia's sanctioned oil exports are currently being transported by these shadow vessels, primarily heading to buyers in India and China. Western governments determined that financial restrictions on paper were no sufficient to stop the physical movement of oil across the ocean. The Smirtos operation suggests a new strategy, using elite military units to physically plug the economic leaks that financial sanctions alone could not close. The tanker began its final journey on June 5th, loading up at the Ust-Luga oil terminal near St. Petersburg. To evade international tracking, the operators deployed a series of bureaucratic maneuvers, starting with a name change, from Myrtos to Smirtos. Next, the vessel adopted a flag of convenience, legally registering itself to sail under the flag of Cameroon. But the plan hit a critical obstacle when Cameroon abruptly expelled the vessel from its registry, leaving the ship without a national sponsor. In maritime law, this made the Smirtos a stateless vessel. Without a flag, a ship loses its national jurisdiction and the legal protections that come with it. This status created a specific legal opening. By losing its flag, the Smirtos became vulnerable to boarding by UK forces without the risk of violating the sovereignty of another nation. When the Smirtos crossed west into the English Channel, it sailed without the armed Russian warships that usually escort shadow tankers. Its path stayed over 12 nautical miles from the coast, placing it strictly within international waters. This distance allowed UK forces to act. Using new boarding authorizations granted in March, they were legally cleared to intercept the vessel while it was outside of any national territorial sea. The strike was a coordinated effort involving the UK's National Crime Agency, Royal Marine Commandos, and logistical support from the French military. The success of the raid demonstrated how international maritime law can be used as a tactical tool to intercept sanctioned cargo in transit. The tactical impact was immediate. Following the raid, tracking data showed other shadow vessels executing sudden U-turns to avoid the Dover Strait entirely. Prime Minister Keir Starmer publicized the operation on TikTok, using the military success to project a stance of national strength against Russian interests. At the same time, the UK government was facing a severe internal debate over a multi-billion-pound deficit in its own defense budget. This raid took place just days after Defense Secretary John Healey resigned in protest, claiming that proposed military funding levels were insufficient to protect the country. The operation allowed the government to claim a high-profile victory against Russia, even as it struggled to resolve deep structural funding gaps within its own Ministry of Defense. For now, the Smirtos remains anchored and monitored off the coast of Weymouth in Dorset. The operation drew praise from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who viewed the detention of the tanker as a necessary step in cutting off Russian oil revenues. Zelensky is now calling for a new legal framework that would allow Western nations to go beyond detention and move toward the permanent confiscation and sale of intercepted oil. With the war's economic front expanding to the high seas, the ability to exploit maritime loopholes and seize multi-million-dollar cargoes has become a significant new pressure point in the ongoing conflict.